I don't know why I do that at the beginning of every episode, but I do.
Good.
Need to have a catchphrase, don't you? Hello, and welcome to Crown Lane on the record with me, Lawrence Bradshaw, and
John Merriman.
John Merriman's here, as per usual. Good to see you, John. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too.
I want to say a very special hello also to Meg. Do you know why I want to say hello to Meg?
No.
Meg is one of our highest frequent listeners of the podcast.
Oh, that's lovely.
And,
just shutting the blind.
Yeah, it's nice, isn't it? Crown Lane sound better, especially when you're closing the blind. You okay?
Yeah, no, I'm okay.
Okay.
Nearly there.
Sorry about this, guys. Hi, Meg. So Meg works as one of the team in Metronome, and she listens to the podcast every time she's making her sandwiches. She doesn't know we're saying this. Hi, Meg. How's the sandwiches going?
Oh, that's wonderful. She's a great member of the team. We love Meg.
Yes, we certainly do. And Happy New Year to everybody listening. Today, we're in part 2 of our 3-parter of the process of recording. Today's episode is about, well, we're calling it Create. Our first one was all about the
Capture?
the capturing of all things that you want to do in the studio. Today we're talking about Create. John, what do we mean by Create? We're calling it that, but what do you mean by that?
Create is the stage after recording, but before mixing.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
You put your finger up like to say, okay, that's enough.
No, what I did was I scratched my nose.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay. Is that enough of a summary?
That's enough of a summary.
Great.
Thank you very much. So that stage in between, that's what we're talking about. And we kind of had a very short chat before about this. And funny enough, I think we're a bit addicted to 3 parts at the moment because we're breaking this episode into 3 parts as well. And the first thing we're having a look at is comping.
Compositing. Very exciting.
So, John, talk us through the idea of compositing. What do you mean by that? What are we talking about within this creating section of the process?
Absolutely. The creating section is the most overlooked part of recording. I think everyone thinks, recording, microphones and studios and the excitement of a new song or something new come to fruition. And mixing, that's where you make it sound amazing. But there's this bit in the middle, which is choosing things like compositing, where you're choosing out of all the takes we did, which bits are we going to use? So that could just be, maybe it's a jazz recording and you've done 6 versions of the same song and you're choosing which one of those takes you're going to be doing. But most often compositing refers to, you might have one song recorded and you've done maybe 10 different vocal takes, or one area's got 13 takes, 15 takes of just the chorus or something. And then you've got a verse that you maybe have got 4 or 5 different takes of. So which ones are you going to be using? What makes the perfect take that is the one that's going to compile to form the one that everybody knows as the complete song at the end? So that's what we mean by compositing.
And probably quite a difficult thing to do as well, especially when you're thinking about our role at the studio. This is something that we always sort of mention to artists who are coming in, especially for the first time. How much of the process do you want us to be a part of? Do you want us to co-produce with you? Do you want us to be almost robotic? We've spoken about this on the podcast before. You make all the decisions. We'll just be, click, 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 and we'll do whatever you say.
The engineer.
So, being the engineer. So, it must be quite difficult being a part of that process and telling someone maybe this is the best take. Perhaps they might not agree with you.
Absolutely. I think the thing that happens when we perform as musicians and artists, we get a certain buzz when we've done a performance and we get to the end of it, we go, that's the take. That's the magic take.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to get over the emotional feeling you have when you've performed well, or you put a little lick in that I don't always get that, but I got it in that take.
Yeah.
And then the engineer says, okay, we're just going to do one more take. And when you do that take, you often play much simpler and safer, rather than trying to attempt something again. You often do a safer take in the end. Songs tend to get more safe the more takes you do, rather than more exciting and more elaborate. So what often happens is the safer take, the first or second of the safer takes, when the musicians have got all the initial excitement out of the way, they're the takes that are often the best ones to use. But if you asked a musician which one they preferred, it's often the one before the safe one. And yeah, they're great. They're really good. And they'd be great in a live context. And that's what most musicians love the most. But in the recorded version, we need a version that actually, this is how the verse actually goes. This isn't the verse with all the fancy bits. This is just the verse. People need to know what the verse is to know what the live version where you've gone off on one is meant to stem all the way back from.
Yeah.
So comping is just that joy of going, I think I know which version is the one that I want to use. And sometimes listen to what the artists are saying and sometimes not. Because it's very easy for them to be swayed. Drummers are the best at it, because they know when they've put a lick in that's really special. And they're like, I want that on the album. But actually, they're probably ignoring the fact that their groove might have been a bit loose when they hit the bridge at the beginning and things like that. And so, yes, we can put that lick in, but actually the take we'll use will be a simpler one, which is a little bit later. We did this thing where we traffic light every single thing we record. So every single day, whenever we're recording, someone will come in. We don't tell them, oh, that was a red take, meaning we'll probably bin it, but there might be something useful in it.
Yeah.
Or an amber take, which is, that's pretty good. We like that. Or it's a green take, and that's amazing. We do that whether we're just engineering or whether we're producing. It's like a habit that we're in, that we'll always do that, which means it's much easier than when the artist says at the end, oh, we'll leave the comping to you, which is what normally happens. And they'll say, my preference was take 7. And that'll be the one that we will hook most things onto. If we believe that. If we go to take 7 and it's green, then we're like, brilliant. Yeah. That's what they felt was best. That's what we thought was good. Let's go with that as our route. And then from there, we comp all the other bits together. Much easier when an artist knows a song, because each take they do, their breaths are in the same place. And it's very easy to chop in those places. Much harder when an artist comes in, they're not prepared, particularly if they're doing rap and every take is slightly different and the way where things are joining up is different. Very, very hard.
Well, it's with rap as well, because most of the time you don't really have musical annotation, do you? So then you're making it up every single time, and you're choosing your breaths differently and how you structure the words. And
it's a very difficult thing to comp rap, unless they're a very proficient rapper and they know this is the one I want. I want these bars, and this is how it's gonna be, and they've got the full idea in their head. But often then it'll be in the studio that the ideas come. And
well, that's the beauty of rap music as well, is that it is very much from the heart in the moment, isn't it?
That's right, and you want to capture that.
Yeah, I love what you were saying about that. When drummers or guitarists, when you find a lick that you do it in the take and you're really proud. And again, I'm not very much a studio musician, much more a live one, but I have it when you do something live and then in your head you're like, oh my word, that was fantastic. And then spend the next verse and chorus thinking, God, I can't believe I did that, while you're singing at the top.
That's right.
But it's quite hard to shake that. But also another thing that you were saying is when you're doing one song and you're going along with it, and then if you're doing it throughout the entire day, it's easy to then lose sight of what the beginning part of it was, the original structure of it, and you get so carried away with embellishments and adding more and more and more that actually you've lost sight of what the original one was.
That's right. Guide tracks are so important for that. So you can just go, okay, is this better than the guide track, or have we lost the essence of the song in the process of creativity? And that happens less often with the band members. Sometimes with guitarists, they'll go off slightly lose focus a little bit in the sessions, but generally it would be musicians generally stick to their parts. They know their parts. It's often the singer that will not quite have nailed how they want the improvisation to go at the end, or the ad-lib sections, and so every time they do it, it can lose its focus a little bit, which is why pre-production and guide tracks are so important. We talked about that in the last episode.
And a question that will be really difficult to answer because there's so many answers to it, but for someone who isn't, doesn't come to the studio very often, has maybe never done this before, what would you say is like an average amount of takes that you'd end up doing? Again, I know that's difficult to answer, but for you, like what you see, what we do here, imagine, let me give you an example, like it's a pop song and someone's recording just guitar, keys, drums, vocals, bass. Like what's your average?
Average for classical, jazz, folk is very, very different to pop, as you say. Pop is often one where you can go down a rabbit hole and just keep doing takes for the sake of it. Normally, though, it's the engineer that's asking for more, or asking for more precision on particular lines. Yeah. And so it can be that you're just dropping in on a few little phrases over and over and over again. There's a famous Billie Eilish video where she's talking to her brother about how many takes she did just to get one little embellishment absolutely perfect. And you can just get into those little corners that go on and on and on. In the studio, we would normally do minimum 3, 4, 5 takes of a vocal pass. Take 1, I would never comment to the artist about any of it. Take 2, if there's errors that I'm thinking, gosh, they did that both times, I wonder if that's what they mean. Yeah. I still probably wouldn't say it on take 2. Then when they do take 3, I'd ask, brilliant, we've got a great take in there. I'll probably orange it on our colour coding. And then ask them, I'll play the bit back and just say, at this point here, is this what you're aiming for? And then they probably go, no, I'm singing a bit flat on that top note. And you go, yeah, brilliant. Let's do a little pass of just that bit. Great. So now the pass that was orange, we could now make green, because that might have been the only problem area. So that's take 3. And then we'll do take 4. Brilliant. Now she's hitting that note every time. Great. We've got really nice. Take 5 is probably where we go, right, let's bring the life back to the song. The performance is lost because we've been doing all the factual stuff. Great, we've got that. Take 6 is often then the one you use, because they've now relaxed, and they know that the engineer, the studio's happy. We've definitely got safety takes. Relax into it. Take 6. Lovely. But it's very different for everything. Sometimes classical musicians, particularly those that have done less studio work, they'll come in the studio and actually only want to do one take, because they're used to learning classically, where you go in, you used to doing your grade exams that you sit in, and even up to grade 8 you get one chance for the song, you play it, you finish it, lovely, or you go on stage, you do your performance, you play it, you finish it. Pop is very, very different. You know, you spend hours in rehearsals doing the songs over and over, so you're used to that kind of, and the songs change and they evolve.
Do you ever have it, say someone comes in and they knock it out of the park on a vocal take, all in one, and you say, no more? Would you always say, let's try and do more?
Let's do a guide. Let's do a backup. I think I would always say, can I have another backup? Because I don't know how far up the hill they are.
Yeah,
are they still on their way up? Is there going to be a better take in them? It might be an amazing take, but I don't know what they're capable of.
Yeah.
And the one afterwards, we then work out whether that was the pinnacle of the hill, or whether there's still further to go. Journey in that is quite interesting, particularly with younger artists or less experienced studio musicians, because their resilience in the studio to comments and why don't we try this? Sometimes that can take the wind out of their sails a little bit. But those that are more experienced, they're used to soaking up every bit of input, because they know, okay, I've given 90%. These comments are to make it 100%. They're not to knock the 90% I gave, pulling me down to 80% because I'm feeling flat. They're to push me up. That is probably where you're then thinking, okay, we're going to run out of time on their emotional clock of being able to give that much performance. So then you think, okay, we need to dive in on this magical take that's got a few errors, and drop in for those bits. So there might just be 1 or 2 takes, and then fixing those bits. And no one can hear the drop-ins. It's if you do them well, then your comping is very natural.
Nice. Okay, we're going to move on to the second part. So this is, hang on, let me get it straight in my head. This is episode 9 of our podcast, which is the second part of a 3-parter. And this is the second question of a 3-part question within the second part of the 3.
As long as we understand it.
I think you might. So we've done our comping. We're now talking about the editing process.
Yes, editing.
So, and the main question that we're talking about now is, how do we phrase it? How do you know when to stop? How do you know when to stop?
Man.
Because like any art, it's really difficult to know what the end point is, and can we make it that little bit better?
Absolutely. I think a good place to start is to listen to live studio recordings and know that is, in essence, the first and third bits of our trilogy. They're the recording, and it's either being mixed in real time or it's being mixed afterwards, but there's no editing being done. So live studio is what it looks like without the editing.
Yeah.
So sometimes there'll be little slips in it and little bits of magic, but that all makes this brilliant live studio recording. And I love a live studio recording because you've got the clinical nature of a space that is designed for recording in, plus the best sound capture and the best performance in a really good environment. And then the mixing, well, then that determines how good the end result sounds. So those 2 bits are brilliant. Putting the middle bit in, it's like a rabbit hole that goes on forever and ever and ever and ever, because the more precise you get, the more precise you're used to. And we're working on an album at the minute. It's got 14 tracks. And the desk mix, so the very first recording we've done with everything in, so we've done multi-track, so we put the guitars, drums, bass, everything down, the Hammond organ, everything's in. And as you do it, the track sort of mixes itself anyway, because you're listening to it while you're working on it. And so you think, oh, drums are too loud, pull them back a bit. So the album's pretty much mixed anyway, straight away. But we haven't done the middle bit, which is the editing. And so then you start with the vocals and auto-tune them. So you've got these brilliantly edited vocals. So now the vocals are in tune, lovely. And then you've got all of the drums, they're all in time. The bass has been synced perfectly to the kick drum, so that's all nice. All your guitars are driving. If they need to be just ahead of the beat, they're just ahead of the beat. Everything is done on one song, and you think, oh, now that sounds amazing. You listen back, gorgeous. That is finished. You can sort of think that feels finished. And then you open the next song, which is the one that we used to think was brilliant because it was the desk mix, and it sounds like it's just a microphone in a studio.
Yeah, it's just worlds apart from what you've now created with the last one.
So that journey you go on is a lengthy one, and it's often determined by a few different factors. The biggest one is nearly always budget. How much money have we got to do this editing? Is it trying to fit into one day all the auto-tune Melodyne process for all the vocals and all the backing vocals to tune everything and all the solo instruments and any guitar lines? Is that just one day we've got for budget for that? And if it is, then that's all we've got. Unless out of the goodness of our heart, we want to just keep going because we've fallen in love with the project and we want it to be out of this world amazing. Or we go back to the client and say, look, there's more that needs doing. What do you want us to focus on? Do you want us to ditch the BVs so that we can spend all our time on the lead vocal if we've run out of budget? And that's the frustrating one for music creatives, I think, when you've got the desire to get to, in inverted commas, perfection, but you haven't got the funds to. Then we have to work out here very carefully how we do that, which is quite difficult.
I'm going to quickly just go back one sec because you mentioned twice now about auto-tune. And for, again, people, maybe you're just a music enthusiast, maybe friends of the podcast, you don't know too much about the industry. If you hear the word auto-tune, you immediately think, you're a cheater, you're not doing it properly, blah, blah, blah. Do you want to explain about the modern day and age that we live in with music production and what auto-tune is? Yeah,
I mean, ever since it was invented in the mid-90s, it's always been a tool that you shouldn't be able to hear, right from its very first iteration. But it also can be put into its extreme mode where every note that you sing has no nuance. It just falls straight to whatever the segments are. So semitones, or you can set it to whatever you want. You can set it to a scale, chromatic. And that's the sounds that you recognise from the songs that were made in the 90s when this new technology had come out.
Yeah.
But it's been used ever since on pretty much every release, any pop release for sure. There are very few pop releases that would ever be done without any essence of pitch correction at all. And that's, in my eyes, like using autocorrect when you're typing. You don't turn it off just because you know how to spell. You have it on because sometimes you're just working at a speed that means that the tool is there to help you and to get you through. If you're writing a letter, for example, or you're writing an email to someone, there's absolutely no point in turning it off and turning off the thing that gives you the little squiggle under the words as well. Because you'll let words through that you're capable of writing correctly, but you didn't on that instance because you were either working too fast or you were working to a deadline. And that's just the same in the studio. We could turn off all the auto-tune, never use it at all. But what it brings to a performance is actually really helpful. And it's also what today's listener expects.
Yeah, because I think you hear the term auto-tune and you immediately think, this is a terrible singer, they need all the help they can get. But that really isn't the case in what we do here, or majority of everyone who comes through the door, who are really, really amazing singers and incredible artists. And I like the synonym there you use for the autocorrect thing. It's a really good point.
Yeah, I like autotune. I like what it brings. We use Melodyne now more than autotune, mainly because it's built into Pro Tools, which is a software we use. And it means that immediately we can record. As soon as we've recorded something in, a vocal line, Melodyne just pops up at the bottom and make sure we can pull it in immediately across the entire song. And it's a great starting point. And it is so accurate now. It's come on so far. That even Chris, who's a much younger engineer than I am, he was much quicker to adopt working that way round, which is the opposite of the way I worked, which was to listen to a natural performance and then only use the tools to fix the bits that were incorrect. Chris uses it on everything, and most producers do these days. Most engineers will go through an entire song and have Melodyne working hard, and then any bits that sound too robotic, they will take it off. So it's just a different way of working. And again, that's the pop world. I would not touch a jazz recording with it. I would definitely do it more like when you're touching up an artwork that's just got a few little bits that you just want to make sure, this is stunning. This really works organically. But I am just going to fix those couple of corners for the sake of the artist more than anyone.
Great. Nice. Okay, well, we're going to take a very quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking about part 3 of our part 2 episode, which is number 9. Stay with us, guys. We need the help.
Passionate about podcasts and sound? Dive into the Sculpt Mixing course. Developed over 2 years, this online course delivers top-tier mixing tips straight from our bustling commercial studio. With guided videos, downloadable audio content, and a comprehensive handbook, you'll elevate your skills at your own pace. Visit crownlanestudio.co.uk/education and enter podcast special at checkout for an exclusive 30% discount. At Crown Lane, we help you sound better. Download now and let's get back to the episode.
No, you don't get to do it. Oh, he beat me. Hello, and welcome back. Welcome back. You know what's funny, John? I was listening to our first episode.
Yeah.
My word. We were so, I think the word would be professional.
Oh, has it gone
Everything.
downhill?
It was actually, I found it quite awkward to listen to. It was quite, hello, my name's Lawrence Bradshaw. It was so not me and you, basically.
Oh, we've got to leave that up.
Yeah. No, it's staying, definitely. But now, you're just interrupting my parts and everything. Anyway, in the break, John was actually saying, I should have mentioned this about the editing part. What did you want to mention, John?
All I wanted to say was we refer to a term that we've kind of invented here, which is called sea level. And we look at the work that we're doing in 2 categories. It's either below sea level, i.e. we're getting things that were errors and things up to the point at which, okay, now the song exists in its, in inverted commas, perfect form. Mm-hmm. And then everything above sea level, i.e. all the mixing and production, is things to be done afterwards. So we're looking at the minute at staying below sea level. So all this editing stage is all just getting everything right to take us to the next stage of it. Mm-hmm. But part of that next stage does come in this middle section, which is the idea of production and bringing extra things in. And I just wanted to give a bit of a foundation to the final of the 3 different elements of this middle section.
Beautiful segue there. Thank you very much. Because the final part that we're talking about, what was it again? Oh yeah, production. Mm-hmm. So thinking about the production side of things, the ideas that going into it, who's deciding that? Take it away, John.
This side is something that is, I think if I was to have an insecurity as a producer, it would be this, because every album I think, am I going to be able to produce this? Or not even every album, every song. Am I going to be able to think of the things that need bringing to this actual song? Will the ideas come to me to mean that this song doesn't just have the linear focus? And by linear, I mean, particularly with bands, they think in a linear format, i.e. I'm the drummer, I'm going to start playing drums at the beginning and I'm going to end at the end. And I'm the bass player, I'm going to play through, and the guitarist and the singer. But thinking of the things that are vertical in a song, so like little riffs that only appear in certain places, or little punctuation marks of ideas or sounds that will, like a whoosh into a chorus, or a sub that's used in the lead into the final chorus, or maybe it's a string part or a Hammond organ part that's just brought in for a particular section of the song that is a vertical thing that isn't something that is part of the whole song. And those ideas are, who decides them, as you were asking, is very much dependent on this continuum from engineer to producer. Is our role in the studio just to engineer, in which case we sit here and we may have had in the pre-pro meeting, you may have said, in this song, we imagine a string quartet. And we've got to this stage and budget no longer allows for it. Yeah. But do we then decide that we're going to use sampled strings, which is very effective, and put it in there? Or is a really good way of doing it, putting a Hammond organ part in, because it fulfills the same sort of, it fills a bit of the mix that needed a bit of depth that strings, the sustain of strings will add. Hammond organ does exactly the same thing textually in the middle of the mix. And that's a decision that is either made by the engineer, if the engineer is having some creative production input, or it's the artist who's saying, or the label that's funding it, this is what we want in this song. I'm very careful that when you do a project, you know what your palette is, because with these production ideas, the world goes on forever. And nowadays, if you've got a laptop at home, you've got Logic on it, or even GarageBand, it's got so much on there. Yeah. You just go mad with thinking, this song could have this sound, this sound, this sound. And actually the discipline is to say at the production side, okay, what's the palette for the album? Are we going to have every kind of percussion on it, or are we just going to have only this shaker? Are we only going to use a shaker that's kind of got a wooden sound, so it's
Yeah.
got this sort of softer sound? And is that across the whole album, or will some tracks need to break that mold? And why are we breaking that mold? Are we going to keep it within this particular sound palette? And the same with instruments. We could have a Hammond organ. You could use a Hammond on one track. You could use a piano, a Fender Rhodes on another one. Or is it that we're going to be stricter and go, no, this band, if they were going to make this sound right on stage, let's just keep our palette really small. Let's have just Hammond organ and just have these percussion instruments that you physically could actually play. Rather than thinking, we're going to have tubular bells hitting one note in this and you've got to take tubular bells to your gig for one note.
It's so true. And I see it a lot in rock music as well, where you have a band and their first album, where they actually don't have that much money. They've begged a label to be able to put together whatever they're going to do, and they do it in 3 days. And, they break through and it's magic. I always bring this back, and I'm really sorry because I know you're not a massive fan, but The Darkness, I love them so much. And their first album, which just won every award, almost every household in the UK had it in their first album, because they just had no money to do it. And it was so raw, and it's just bass, 2 guitars, drums, BVs, lead vocal. That is what the album is.
Yeah.
And it's so good. Second album, all of a sudden they got a couple of million quid in the bank account, and there's a 1 minute pan flute solo and all this strings and everything. It's like, there's nothing wrong with that per se. And I actually really like their second album, but so many people were like, what is this rubbish? Because it's not what you did in the beginning. And actually it was their budget constraints and time that made them sound that good. And then all of a sudden, too many options, too much money, too many options to then really lose focus on what you had. And that happens a lot, the dreaded second album, isn't it? Of then trying to, especially if it's been successful.
I think the world of rap has a completely opposite problem, in that the creativity all happens often in a bedroom or on a laptop or in a smaller context.
Yeah.
And all of that is done first, and then it's pictured as bars. People say, I've got my bars that I've already recorded. Do they say bars? Let me just
Beats.
the beats. I'm so cool.
Come on, Grandad.
I am actually going to edit that bit out.
No, you are not.
No, they've got their
What do
beats.
those young people call it again? I'm going to keep referring to it back, so you definitely can't edit it out.
Okay.
Talking about the editing process.
So the beats that they come to the studio with are as if that is already made in concrete, and then vocals are something that's added on top.
Yeah.
That concept for me as a older engineer, I find that really limiting, because sometimes the voice and the ideas that come to it will actually bring new ideas, production ideas that I want to include, but they're already embedded in what they're referring to as the beats, which are basically the backing track that's finished. And you end up with this sort of 2-part thing that is so rigid, it can't then go to a new place. It's very hard to develop that.
That's the thing about rap music as well, is that 99% of the quality content of a song is the vocal. And the music is just there. The instrumental track is there just to serve the rapper rather than the other way around. So quite often you'll have younger rappers who they just really don't care what it is that's playing in the background. That's just serving as a medium for them to
regularly
create.
They'll bring two or three different instrumentals.
Yeah, not care which one's on.
Which I can't get my head around.
I know, but there's something I do get it. And I mean, in my band we have a rapper and he's been in there for forever and ever and ever. And he'll practice. He'll just get beats on, or bars, if you prefer to call it that way. No, you can't edit it out. We'll get you a cup of cocoa in a minute. But he'll just get random stuff, backbeats on YouTube, and just rehearse all of his parts, because he's not doing any melodic lines in it. So it doesn't matter what the background is. So completely different world. I like it because it's, for me, rap music and folk music are the same thing, because it's storytelling. The main thing is that one person who's trying to tell a story, and the music is just there to accompany it in some way.
And often the folk tradition has the tunes that have changed over the years, but the words have remained the same. And someone will write a new tune to the old words, and that's much more similar to rap than perhaps we'd realise.
Yeah, I saw a brilliant thing the other day that was someone complaining that Taylor Swift, all of her chord progressions are the same. She's not doing anything new. And then it was like, try not to mention that to any blues musicians. It's just exactly the same thing. Exactly. You know, you listen to a Ray Charles album or, you know, Johnny Cash. I love Johnny Cash. Listening to his music, every single song sounds pretty much exactly the same. But it's about his story that he's telling, and
Absolutely.
that's what really makes it, and that's what you get in rap music and folk music especially.
Totally. And get back to the topic of this sort of the middle section of recording, all of those styles that we've just talked about, this section is less important for. So folk music, rap, classical music and jazz don't really have this process requiring quite the focus that pop music does and that rock music does, where this middle section is vitally important. And because the studio grew up over the last sort of 8 decades.
That's a long time.
80 years. And that over that same time, popular music has developed. The use of studios in this middle section, the editing bit that we're talking about, the creative section, that's where studios have really come into their own to make a space which is like a laboratory for creating and developing songs from what they were when they were recorded and to the format that people want to listen to them in. So if you take that middle bit out, you end up with folk music and you end up with a live studio recording which works well for things like jazz, things like more organic, things like acoustic singer-songwriters, more than it does for pop recordings or full rock bands that need so much more of this middle section to be really, really tight.
Yeah. Lovely. Right. A couple of little extra things just to finish off. Let's do our tips and tricks section. And I wanted to ask you, if we're recording at home, not in the studio, we're doing it in our bedroom, whatever we're doing, imagine pop or rock song, let's take for example, because that's more comprehensive what we're talking about. What should we be bearing in mind when we're talking about this creative process, post-recording, pre-mixing? So
we talked about the recording last time and how the acoustics of your room and things like that. We've moved on from that now, and we're looking at actually the process and what you do with the editing and everything that we've talked about in this episode hopefully will be helpful. The traffic lighting, I think that's vitally important because
that's brilliant.
You often forget when you're recording actually which take out of the 17 was the good one, and you don't need to have to keep listening to them all every time.
Yeah.
And actually some of the red takes we find are the ones that are quite useful. So something like we had recently a singer in who had accidentally by take 2 changed 2 of the words in the song just slightly, and we hadn't noticed the change, which is very unlike us actually. We love spotting and making sure that we're fulfilling that sort of quality control purpose as well, but we missed these 2, and it was at the later stage when it went to the label spotted the original artist who recorded this song, who was part of the process, very famous.
I was going to say, was it the one? Just for context, naming 0 names, but it was quite a famous artist who'd written this song and then getting someone else to do a different version of it for charity, and
they changed. They
accidentally changed, and it was
But we had a red take that actually had a couple of the words correct.
Yes,
as they were on the very first time they were sung. So it's very useful to have that labelling. So I'd say definitely if you're at home, label everything, because you don't know, you might come back to it weeks or months later. The other thing is, even simpler than labelling things, is to imagine that you're recording in an analog context. So by that, I mean tape. And when you're recording to tape, one of the beauties of it is you can't do a second take and keep the first take.
Yeah.
By thinking I'm going to drop in and make this better, you have to know that you definitely can do it better. And if you're not sure, then chances are you'll leave the one that was pretty good. And it means you make decisions much, much quicker on the fly because you know you can't do it later. And the sort of American phrase, we'll fix it in the mix, is not a thing because you can't. You don't have the assets there to be able to fix it later because you've only got the one version. So I would say imagine you're working in an analog environment and keep things simple and make decisions on the fly. We do all our recording, we track through compression and EQ. So we embed that in. We trust that we are getting it right at the tracking stage. So where a lot of people record flat and then open up the song again and now start EQing the bass drum, then the snare drum, then the hi-hats, then making sure your overheads and then the toms and doing all of that work. We do all that at the tracking stage So that when it comes late, which is much more analog, it's deciding, okay, we're going to be brave and we are going to compress this snare drum and the kick drum and we're going to record them exactly as we want them to be. And it's also more enjoyable to work with because the waveforms are already compressed and even. You don't have the spiky looking waveform, even though it's running through a compressor, which sounds now more flat and more even. The recorded sound is visualized exactly as what we're listening to. So it's actually a much simpler thing to work with as well. And it also means if we're midway through and we need to send the project to another studio, when they open it, they don't need to have the same plugins as us because it already sounds amazing from the actual recording process. So yeah, doing it at home, imagine you're in an analog context and make the decisions on the fly. And you'll probably get a result that is done much quicker and you'll probably be happy with it.
My first album I ever recorded, 14 years old, on a 4-track cassette recorder, and it was exactly that. And not only that, but every time you got it wrong and you re-recorded, you lost your quality.
Yeah, you get more hiss.
Exactly.
A little bit of top end goes every time.
It really was. It was me and one of my best mates, and we made this album, and then doing the trick of bouncing 3 tracks into one to then free up the other.
That adds a bit of hiss.
just a touch, actually. I don't know. I think it was a Toshiba.
It suddenly feels like the band's gone backwards somewhere, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Into a fog.
To give you an idea of our budget, we didn't have a mic stand, so I recorded all the lead vocals. We gaffer taped a microphone to a broom.
Okay.
And then held the broom.
Wow.
So, yeah. So
I did an album where we sellotaped a mic to someone's head once. That wasn't in the Crown Lane days. That's when I was very young.
Were they the mic stand or they were a clip-on mic?
They were singer and mic.
Oh, right,
yeah,
okay.
They were both.
Their name wasn't Michael, was it?
No, it wasn't.
Oh, that would have been good. Right, okay. Well, enough of that ridiculousness. Any recommendations? I'm going to start off and I'm going to recommend something in-house, actually. This might seem like a bit of a shameless plug, really. Here at Crown Lane Studio, new year, new offer. We're doing live studio recordings. We're doing these sessions they're 3.5 hours long. We can do them in the daytime. We're also, for the first time, opening up to doing evening sessions. So if you're an evening band here, you don't have to be. You can come along and we're doing a 7 till 10 recording slot where we're just capturing your amazing, wonderful sound. The nice thing about it is that we're going to work at your pace. If you want to do just 3 songs in that time, no problem. You get 3 songs at the end of it. If you're really, really amazing and just power through and do 12 songs, bang, you've got 12 songs, all for one price. That's the deal. £450. Please get in contact with me at our info@crownlanestudio.co.uk if you're interested. John, any recommendations?
Oh, gosh. Recommendations?
You almost fell off a table then.
Recommendations. You've made us sit on these high stools this time. I'm quite liking it.
I like it.
I would do a shameless plug as well and say, check out the Crown Lane Live videos and get involved in any of the Crown Lane Lives that are coming up. We're very excited to be relaunching this year the concept of Crown Lane Live, which is very similar to what Lawrence was talking about, but with the addition of a live audience. And those nights are some of my favourite nights in the whole time of running the studio. It's been hosting the Crown Lane Live events where we've got an audience in Metronome watching on the big screen and then meeting the artists and coming and walking around the studio and being a part of it all. The concept is just one of the most beautiful.
It really is lovely.
We're so looking forward. This year we're going to be doing it differently in that we're doing it all in 1 week. So rather than one a month for 6 months, we're going to have a whole week of every night different live artists. So we are very much looking forward to that. So I would say engage with the studio in terms of the Crown Lane Lives, whether you're a band and you want to get involved with that or an artist, or you want to come along and just spend a brilliant evening enjoying the wine, enjoying watching a band, enjoying meeting some new people and spending time at the studio for a very small cost. It's a great night. So yes,
and you can find them on our website, can't you? And you can also, if you just search on YouTube for Crown Lane Live, they'll all pop up. There's loads of them. Really, really great. Doing 1 week's worth of them, we're either going to think it was the best idea ever for behind the scenes for us, or we're going to all be very grey at the end of it. Feel like we've aged 80 decades.
Absolutely. I think the season 1 was a really good challenge for us because we faced so many things at the same time. We did our first ever live broadcast. We did our first proper multi-camera filming in the studio. Midway through, we realised our Vision mixer was not up to the job, even though it was brand new, and we upgraded that. And then even towards the end of the season, we realised that the video editing software wasn't up to the job either, so we changed that. So a lot of season 1 was about realising what our limits were and where the studio... We knew what we were doing with sound, but visual broadcast and putting a whole live event on, that was such a challenge.
Yeah.
We're pleased we did it.
We overcame it.
Yeah.
We learned lessons.
And we're now ready for season 2.
Yeah, looking forward to it. And also, if you, from my shameless plug recommendation, the Crown Lane live videos, they're a really good indication to what you can end up sounding like if you come and record here.
Absolutely.
That's it. Next episode, we're going to be talking about the part 3 of the entire process, which is about our mixing.
Cannot wait.
Our sculpting, if you will. But otherwise, that's it from John, his stool. No, I won't say that.
You said it.
That's it from John and Lawrence. And the stools.
Oh, we were doing so well.
Well, no, we weren't. Goodbye, everybody.
See you next time.
Whee!